July 8th, 1999. It started like any other day in Las Vegas. Summer temperatures were expected to be above 100 degrees. What wasn't expected was how two storm systems would combine to create one of the most severe floods in Clark County history. Hello, I'm Betty Hollister, and welcome to another edition of the Flood Channel. These residents here at Miracle Mile Mobile Home Park know firsthand about the dangers of flooding in our valley. During that '99 storm, dozens of people watched as a mobile home was pulled into the channel by the raging water. Since then, though, a lot has changed. So don't adjust your TV. We're taking a look back at how our valley's flooded past has helped pave the way for a better protected future. Carrie Ann has a story about the challenges in creating the Regional Flood Control District.
Thanks, Betty. After countless flood events in Clark County, a group of concerned citizens decided to meet the problem of flooding head-on. The challenge, how to best deal with the immediate flood control needs of a rapidly growing community. Looking back, it's a task these community leaders took seriously.
When I came to Las Vegas in 1983, it was with the Las Vegas Stars, the professional baseball team, the affiliate with the Padres. And I certainly was new to Las Vegas, new to the desert, to the Southwest. And we saw firsthand as baseball players what desert storms and flash flooding was all about, because in both 1983 and 84 there were tremendous storms and flooding all over the valley. Our games were postponed down at Cashman Field. And that was my introduction to the devastation that floods do cause.
So in the early 80s I became a county commissioner in 1981, representing a lot of about half the county and area, a lot of the outlying areas. Laughlin, Searchlight, Boulder City, Henderson, all the way out to Moapa Valley, Mesquite, Bunkerville, and a good deal of the Las Vegas Valley as well. And we got some very serious flooding in the early 80s and major property damage, and there were some deaths. I remember in 1982, several areas of this county were just hit so hard by flooding, and I remember going out with a group of volunteers to Overton in the Moapa Valley and digging mud out of basements.
It wasn't that flood control wasn't being done, but it was being done on a piecemeal basis. So the city of Las Vegas would just be protecting their corporate boundaries, but their flood control features would stop at their corporate limits. And there was no comprehensive regional approach to address the flooding issue. The Charleston Underpass would flood every time you got any kind of significant rain. The parking lot at Caesar's Palace and sometimes inside the hotel properties would get flooded out, and of course just across the strip at the Imperial Palace was a total mess whenever it flooded, and then you started to get property damage out into the neighborhoods as well. Living in the desert didn't happen that often, and the town wasn't developed enough, I think, that you experienced a lot of property damage or loss of life. That started changing over the years, though. It started to become a major problem, I think, in the 70s, and by the time we got to the early 80s, some of us started to think that it was something that needed some serious action. Well, floodwaters do not recognize entity boundaries, so there needed to be a comprehensive approach to address the problem.
So it was the first time a really long-ranging picture of flood control had been looked at, and the past studies had really been very localized and focused on a specific area of flooding or a particular watershed.
During the early 1980s, some work was done to improve flood control in Clark County. In 1981, a $32 million bond was issued to build 3 detention basins in the north and west areas of the valley. However, leaders quickly realized the piecemeal approach wasn't working. They needed to organize a regional effort to get flooding in Clark County under control. But when the issue was first brought to the legislature in 1983, the measure didn't pass.
And then the floods of 1984 arrived.
In the summer of 1984, from the middle of July to the middle of September, there were 6 major storms. The nature of the place was that there were few in population, and when these rains would happen, it would flood, and then the next day the sun would come out and nobody would remember it. We have the Duck Creek Wash crosses in our community 3 different roads. And each time those roads would be washed out, and I would call the commissioner, and I would call Public Works, And they would come out and a lot of Scotch tape and bandages. They'd clean up the road and they'd put in sand so that we could get across the road. When the floods came, I can't tell you how many times we would have to park our car, climb over the perimeter fence, walk the bridle path till we got to our house, climb over the wall to get home. I can't tell you how many times we did that. These were pictures right around the corner here, and the roads were torn up, and at that point, the big pipes, which are called culverts, were underneath the roads. They're all exposed. It was just unbelievable because floodwaters know no jurisdictions. They just start in the mountains and they end at Lake Mead, and they go where they want to go.
After the storms of 1984, people began to see how not having flood control was affecting their lives. So did the state legislature. So in 1985, a measure was passed allowing the creation of the flood control district. And in 1986, residents voted to tax themselves 1/4% to pay for flood control.
In September of 1986, that tax was passed overwhelmingly, and that was 1/4 cent for flood control, and for flood control only, and only in southern Nevada.
And I guess the rest is history. The voters said yes. I can't tell you how many public meetings we went to. It was basically my whole life. And right away we appointed a Citizens Advisory Committee.
It was important to me to keep abreast of what was doing, and that when the Citizens Advisory Committee was established, I wanted to be part of that. I mean, I was very happy to be part of it because we were so devastated where we live.
In January of 1988, I was hired as the assistant general manager. In '93, I became the general manager of the district. And through that time, I've seen $1.6 billion of infrastructure being built throughout Clark County. That infrastructure is a cost to the taxpayers because we're funded by the 1/4% sales tax. But more importantly, it's investment into the society. Those projects are there for that big storm that's going to hit. It's hit in the past, it will come again in the future.
We haven't had to go back and ask the public for any more funding. We've made this work, and every single penny was devoted to flood control only and nothing else. And it's been a great success. And we have to be a little bit more patient still because there's several years to go of finishing some of the essential projects.
Currently, we have 18 projects under construction throughout Clark County, an investment of $150 million, and we estimate that that's going to employ 2,000 people. Very important in these tough economic times.
Today, we now have 83 detention basins and more than 550 miles of channel and underground storm drain protecting our community. It's an investment many long-term residents say is well worth it.
We have 4 bridges in our area that were built because of the flooding. And we have been, knock on wood, we have been very safe since that. And it is, thank heaven, and everybody appreciates the value of the flood control district because we have saved lives and property.
When we've had major storm events, and when they've hit in the areas where infrastructure is fully built out, there's been no incidents. It's almost people don't even realize the devastation of 30 years ago. Nothing today. That has been successful. And we're more than halfway there. But we have to continue to make the investment into Southern Nevada with the flood control district. We still have to build our detention basins and flood channels to truly protect 100% of Southern Nevada.
Well, if somebody wants to call me the father of flood control, I'm very happy to accept it. That's a great honor. It's something that means a lot to me, and something that I believe in and think we've done a lot of good. But it tends to ignore the fact that there were so many people involved. Good board and great staff and a citizen committee and just a lot of private citizens as well.
I have a lot of personal satisfaction. I have no idea why I continue to be interested in this kind of thing. I'm not an engineer. I'm an interested citizen. There's a sense of accomplishment, a great sense of accomplishment. We have really saved a lot of this valley, a long way to go, but we have saved a lot of money and property and lives up to this point. And I think it's a very excellent thing to be part of, and I'm very proud to be part of it.
It is a very rare opportunity and a privilege to be able to actually create something new. and something that has the impact, I think, that flood control has.
People see the construction, they see the finished product, and they realize that they are being protected, but the investment is what we need to emphasize as much as anything else. So when the events do come, and they will come, especially during flash flood season, that we have positioned ourselves as a public agency to truly protect the citizens of Las Vegas.
A lot of flood control progress has been made in the past 25 years. I'm at the intersection of Gowan and Rainbow. Back in August 2003, a thunderstorm in this area dropped nearly 3 inches of rain in 90 minutes. Video of motorists stranded in the flooded intersection ran on local news stations for days. About $20 million worth of flood control facilities were in design or under construction in the area when the storm hit. The district says that if that infrastructure had been complete, the flows down Gowan would have been 80% less, eliminating any damages to homes or businesses.
In that 2003 storm, more than 50 homes were damaged. One was completely destroyed. The city of Las Vegas estimated nearly $1.5 million in damages. After the break, we'll talk to some longtime residents about their early memories of the history of flooding in our valley.
Jess, time for dinner, sweetie. Oh. Oh, what the? Whoa. Oh, no. Yeah.
Stormwater and anything you spill into the street goes untreated into Lake Mead.
Whoa! Where am I now? Hey, Mom, my boat! Ew!
Help protect the environment. Brought to you by the Stormwater Quality Management Committee.
Hey, Nevada, a new battle is born. Take pride in America. This is your land, so lend a hand. To learn more, visit takepride.gov.
To volunteer in Nevada, visit getoutdoorsnevada.org, a program brought to you by the Southern Nevada Agency Partnership and UNLV.
Don't press your luck. Steer clear of floodwater.
Welcome back. Throughout Southern Nevada's history, a severe storm could completely cripple the community. In some cases, lives were lost. Carrie Ann takes a look back at how those early storms wreaked havoc for residents and visitors.
That's right, Betty. Back in the early days of Las Vegas, a summer storm could literally shut down the city. Residents had trouble getting in and out of their own neighborhoods. Here at the Imperial Palace, their parking garage still sees these issues with flooding. And as the district works to minimize flooding throughout the valley, some longtime residents would say that in order to prepare for the future, you have to take a minute to stop and remember the past.
You know, probably the first storm that I can remember was dying tropical depression Boris in June. And it was really weird because June is traditionally, historically, the driest month that we have. But we had a tropical storm came in. I can remember being out in the afternoon walking my dog and seeing just a black wall of clouds coming over Mount Potosi.
Every time it would rain hard, we'd head to the Charleston Underpass. I remember days when US 95 was fairly new, and where it crosses Jones, the overpass there, I lived in that area, I remember seeing people diving off the overpass into the water below. The last flood, the last real big flood that I remember that I was out in, I was at the corner of Western and Oakey over there. And cars were floating around in the intersection there, and there were people going out and getting people out of the cars in the middle of that intersection. So a lot of that has changed, obviously, because of the flood channels and the detention basins that have been built here.
Well, when we first moved here, basically we lived over in East Sahara in an apartment there, and then moved out to Paradise Valley. People don't even know what I mean when I say Paradise Valley, near Eastern and Viking. And when it rained, you really couldn't drive because the streets were so slick out there. And we moved into this home in 1976, and the same problems existed here.
I remember also vividly the flood from a few years ago that flowed through the wash and through the Miracle Mile trailer park out there on Boulder Highway. And the trailer, we have video of the dirt being washed away and the trailer going into the river and down the wash.
I was coming home from work. We live over in the Scotch 80 area now, and my office was down on 4th Street, and I was actually driving for some reason around Western and Oakey, And I didn't think anything of it because it was just raining, and then all of a sudden the rain really came down, it poured, and I was very, very concerned that the car would be taken away in the rain. We had no idea how the floods affected the day-to-day life here, and when we first saw it, it was shocking.
As the city grew, so did the valley's problems with flooding. The rapid development created more rooftops and concrete, which caused more runoff. Rescuers' response times grew longer as they struggled to navigate flooded neighborhoods. So in the early 1990s, the district began installing rain gauges that are an important tool to help warn first responders about where and how hard it's raining.
When I started in 1988, one of my first charges was to implement the flood threat recognition system. In mid-July 1990, we had a very large storm in the middle of the night on the far west side of town where at that time no one lived. We started making phone calls to the Imperial Palace because we knew that it was on Flamingo Wash drainage area. So we gave them about an hour's heads up of the potential for water coming through their area. And based on the rate of rise, I mean, it went up quickly. We called the Imperial Palace again and said, it is coming, get people out of there. So they had about 15-20 minutes to evacuate it. As it turns out, they had a major flood in there, tore up the pavement behind the Imperial Palace on Winnick. 2 or 3 dozen cars got totaled by the floodwaters under there. The value of the flood threat recognition system was demonstrated in that storm alone. We started to have believers in what we were doing.
I was sworn in June 28th of '99, and I experienced the first 100-year flood. Shortly thereafter, within a matter of 10 days, I think it was July the 8th, if I'm not mistaken, of '99, and it came as a complete shock because I had been speaking to Mr. Frazier, who was the director of the flood district. He was giving me a lesson on how all these machines were able to predict the flood, and as we went through it, he said it's as dry as a bone, and as soon as I got out there, boom, the rain just poured down, and it was frightening because I still remember we had to go to various parts of the city and talk to people who had no flood insurance, and their homes were basically ruined as a result of it.
Throughout the history of Las Vegas, there have been dozens of storms that have impacted the valley, most recently in August 2003 and July of 1999. In that 1999 storm, President Bill Clinton declared Clark County a federal disaster area because of the extensive damage caused by the flood. This was not the first time the valley had received federal aid because of a flood event. In 1984, the area was declared a federal disaster area for the first time by President Ronald Reagan. More than 95% of the roads in the Las Vegas area were either closed or washed out as a result of that storm. But it's the storm of 1975 that many long-term residents say is their first memory of flooding in our valley. Pictures of cars floating in the Caesars Palace parking lot were pasted across the newspaper's front page.
The first one that I saw was the Caesars Palace flood. It was, it was before anything else was built, basically on the Strip. Caesars was sitting there by itself. The Flamingo was across the street, and the wash ran right, basically through the parking lot at Caesars Palace. And the rains came in the right place at the right time and the right intensity, and all of a sudden a wall of water came through.
Well, in '75, I was working at Caesars Palace. My wife worked across the street at the Flamingo. And it was midday sometime, and she called me and said, there's a really bad storm coming, we should probably go home. And I didn't exactly think I needed to go home, so she went home, make sure the kids are okay. A couple hours later, I get a phone call that if we have cars in the parking lot, you better go get them. And by the time I got out there, most of the parking lot was flooded. Well, it looked like a river. I mean, there was just a river with cars in it, basically. The parking lot was a ravine that had been asphalted over with parking spaces in it, but when it rained really bad, that would fill up with water. Well, this was a really bad storm.
I remember the television cameras and the coverage was unbelievable. And up until that point, I don't recall, we saw the problems on the roadways, and it was frightening to see the power of that water moving so quickly.
We all knew that the wash was there and that it would flood, but I don't think anybody ever thought it would flood like that.
During the past 25 years, the district has invested $1.6 billion in flood protection. That's a big impact on our community. But while the valley is better protected from flooding today, sometimes the weather is unpredictable.
We are sort of at the whim of Mother Nature, and the flood control system obviously is a big protection against catastrophe.
And the bottom line really is we have to keep on doing this because you never know when it's going to come here. And when it comes without any warning. There's no notice. They don't say get ready. I mean, it comes. And fortunately, we've made some improvements as far as advising the public as to how to respond to it. If you love the community the way we do, you do your very, very best every day to make it a better place for your friends, your children, your family, and you're able to accomplish that. So as far as the flood is concerned, the flood district, that's all part of it. It's all part of the equation. In order for everything to work, everything has to work.
Right behind the Imperial Palace parking garage remains one of the few areas that still has problems with flooding. The hotel was built on top of the Flamingo Wash. That's why millions of gallons of water rush through here almost every time it rains. The district has done a lot of work upstream to help reduce the flow. But until the channel under the hotel can be expanded, this area will continue to see problems with flooding.
Thanks, Carrie Ann. Expanding the channel under the Imperial Palace is a pretty complex issue. For now, Imperial Palace responders rely on the district's flood threat recognition system to prepare for a flood. After the break, we're highlighting the winners of this year's license plate Billboard contest.
Seriously, the ref botched that call. He ruined the game.
I know, baby.
Babe, it's my bonus check. You know what this means.
I do know what this means. Oh my God, new wardrobe.
Oh, come on, you know. We can buy flood insurance. Yes!
In Clark County, floods can strike at any time, and not just in flood zones. Flooding can cost thousands of dollars in damage, destroying your home and its contents. Do you have flood insurance?
Don't press your luck. Steer clear of floodwater.
I'm Agent Smith.
I'm Agent Jones.
And we're back busting people who pollute Clark County.
Oh,
Sir, you're gonna have to come with us.
What have I done now?
Sir, did you know by washing your car at home puts chemicals and trash into storm drains?
Really?
Car washes recycle water and they don't pollute Lake Mead.
Oh.
Is Clark County your home?
And you don't like trash in your home?
No.
Then don't trash Clark County. It's our home too.
Okay.
The work the district has done to reduce the risk of flooding only tackles part of the problem. Another goal is to teach people about flood safety. Slogans like "Turn around, don't drown" remind motorists about the dangers of flash flooding. Another tool is our license plate Billboard contest. Carrie Ann talks with this year's winners.
Thanks, Betty. The Charleston Underpass has been the poster child of flash flooding since it was completed in February of 1950. But since the district's improvements in the year 2000, this area of Charleston, near downtown, has not flooded. While our construction program is top priority, the message of flood safety is just as important. Behind me hangs our winning license plate billboard. The English winner, H2O Trap, reminds residents to steer clear of floodwater. Let's meet our English and Spanish winners and take a look back at how the contest was started.
I really enjoy this promotion and I follow it closely every year, and I've been in Las Vegas for almost 40 years now. So I'm really aware of all the work that you people have done and how bad it used to be in the past and how much better it is now.
It was actually a surprise because I forgot I had submitted the entries, but it felt great. I think it's a great idea that you guys are doing this, especially because you're involving the community in something that is very important.
For almost a decade, we had 5,000–6,000 people coming into Las Vegas, calling it home, that weren't aware of the dangers of flash flooding. So the outreach, the educational component has always been important at the district. An example of that educational outreach is the Billboard Contest. We asked the community to give us some slogans as far as safety messages that would be placed up on a billboard.
I entered in the first year, and I've been entering every year since then. And this year I was stunned that I won because all my friends were aware of it, and we all chat at work about our ideas. And I thought some of the other ones that I heard were really good too.
Robertson Wood Advertising has been working with the flood control for nearly 20 years. And it was during my tenure as a copywriter that we actually started shifting our messaging from a more sort of traditional governmental messaging that was warning and don't do this and don't do that. And we were kind of looking at a lot of research which basically says people behave in accordance with the way others behave, and conversely, people don't do what they think will make them look foolish. And we said, well, why not come up with humorous things like, late for dinner that, mimicked license plates, very graphic, bold, and it's kind of funny. Because of that, it's been very popular and successful, and it's continued for nearly a decade. People started sending this stuff in, I believe unsolicited, and then we sort of made it an official contest.
And we had 200 people respond 7 years ago, which we thought was wonderful. What a great way to get community buy-in and involvement.
People, I've heard testimonials or customers saying every time when it rains, they think of those images on the billboards in their head. When they see the billboards, they realize, oh, it's flood season again.
We've been in the valley for over 40 years. I have many friends that were actually personally involved in some of the rescues. It's not just that I was here in town watching these issues on TV. I was actually a part of these things and I saw them firsthand. It brings back a lot of memories to me each time I think of the flood control district and all that has changed over the last several decades.
The winning entry was inundados, using the number 2 for the DOS. I mean, it means flooded. I'm from Guadalajara, a city in Mexico where we have a lot of floods. During the summer, it rains every single day. So I actually didn't understand why such an important thing for flood, because I grew up with that, so I knew what to do when flooding was happening.
I was thinking to myself one day when I saw one of your billboards that it looked like the car was stuck in a water trap. And I thought, I wonder if anybody thought of that one. Because usually you want a water trap to be something that gobbles up your golf ball, not your car.
And that synergy, that relationship between our mission to protect property and lives and educating the public is worked out better than anyone could expect.
Everyone knows about this campaign. But with something like the flood control and a public service message, it's always rewarding to know that our work is actually saving lives.
And that, again, that citizen involvement, the buy-in, the ownership of what we're trying to do as a public agency, that's a sign of success.
Last year we thought we'd reached our limit with nearly 1,800 entries, but this year you blew us all away by sending in 3,957 flood safety messages. And at the district, we know everyone's a winner when it comes to flood safety.
Thanks, Carrie Ann. And that's going to do it for this historical edition of the Flood Channel. Remember to log on to our website at regionalflood.org for more information about the history of flooding in your neighborhood. You can also find us on Facebook. For all of us here at the Flood Channel, I'm Betty Hollister, and remember to always be flood safe.